Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Hello everybody, it's the Irish dude again. Actually feeling a bit grumpy today. Can't put a specific reason on why that might be. But there is one good thing about getting older, and that is people tolerate your grumpiness more. They're more inclined just to say, well, that's just his way. And the one thing about being in a grumpy mood is you get less tolerant of chronic stupidity, which is why you should really stay away from the internet, probably when you're feeling that way. You come across stories like some US pastor who claims that flooding is punishment brought on by God. Anyway, I don't think I've mentioned it in any of my previous videos, but I actually have a degree in science. Now, I don't think this really qualifies me as a scientist, because to really be called a scientist or a doctor or anything like that, you actually have to practice it. And I've never actually worked as a scientist. But at least it does give me a certain background, so when I read things in the media, I feel I can make maybe a more qualified judgment than some people can. Which is why I always find it funny how people who have absolutely no knowledge of science or pretty much anything else feel qualified to not only have an opinion on it, but to make statements regarding it. Let's take an example: the age of the planet. Now, this is something that's actually fairly well decided upon. It's about 4.5 billion years, give or take a few one way or the other. And there is some debate about that, but it's a matter of degrees. One thing it's definitely not 6,000 years old. Now, the world itself doesn't actually care what age you think it is. It's really just a huge rock. But should we care? Now, of course, when I'm talking about people in this context, I'm probably referring to politicians. A recent example of a politician we're all fairly familiar with is George W. Bush. Now, it's fairly well known that George is creationist, Christian type, does subscribe to this early Earth model. You'd have to ask yourself why, though. And to my knowledge, the Bush family made their fortune, or at least part of it, through the oil industry. If you don't know this, oil is a product of very ancient processes which transforms long dead organisms into types of raw hydrocarbons. Now, this process requires heat, pressure and time. Lots and lots of time. Quite a bit longer than 6,000 years. Now, the oil industry employs a lot of scientists, specifically geologists, to know about this kind of stuff. But you'd like to think that somebody who's made their fortune from the industry should know this kind of stuff too. A good knowledge of geology and the Earth's processes is extremely useful for the oil industry. Also, coal and natural gases or any other type of fossil fuels. It gives you a good idea where it should be you're drilling. So again, I'd ask the question, why does George W. still think the world's 6,000 years of age? Now, the funny thing about this type of blindness is how selective it is. You hear constant attacks on certain strands of science, such as evolution, climate change, but not so much on the theory of gravity or relativity. I wonder why this is. So let's look at evolution. Basically, without evolution, there is no modern biology. As Richard Dawkins says, evolution is a fact. When science uses the word theory, it means something very different to most lay people's understanding of the term. My own feeling is the reason that evolution is attacked like this is because it makes people uncomfortable. People have a certain self-image, and the theory of evolution conflicts with that. But again, the world, the universe, doesn't really care what you think. Of course, a more cynical person than I, actually I don't know if there is a more cynical person than I, might say that the reason so many politicians subscribe to such thoughts is because they think that that's what we want to hear. But to me, that's not good enough. If you're putting yourself out there as a leader, then it's up to you to raise the bar a bit. We live in a world that is built on science and engineering. There's almost no aspect of our world that is not shaped by these. We routinely live into our 80s and beyond because of advances in medical science and our understanding of biology. We can travel anywhere and live anywhere with advances in engineering and material sciences, and these are based on physics and chemistry. Finally, we can commute instantly to someone standing on the South Pole if we want to. I think you get the idea. So does science have its downsides? Of course it does. In the same way a hammer can be used to build a house, you can beat somebody to death with it. Science is the tool we have built the modern world with. Now, if you have a problem with the modern world and want to live in a cave, then by all means abandon science. Some of the anti-science rhetoric I hear I find quite baffling. I think for every one of us, we all know somebody who probably wouldn't be with us if it wasn't for a medical intervention. I think science has given us far more than it has taken. So am I saying we accept everything on face value? Of course not. That's actually not the way science works. Science works on things being challenged and tested. What I can understand is why more leaders don't actually do some research, don't actually speak to scientists and understand how these problems can be addressed and dealt with properly. Of course, this is largely our own fault, as we are like that guy who won't accept evolution, as he thinks he's made in God's image. We hear what we want to hear, and when the truth comes out, we ignore it or call it heresy. We accept the easy answers to problems that don't have easy answers. So guess what? They'll never get solved. And yes, you can still be religious and accept science. The Catholic Church does. So, do your own research. Have an opinion based on reality. We need to be more critical about what we read in our media, what our politicians say. Because what's put out there is what the next generation absorbs. So it's very important that we look to educate our next generation of scientists and engineers, as they are the people who will build the next world. Anyway, as I always say, that is just my opinion. And if you're interested in what I've had to say, please like or subscribe to the channel. Thank you.